I was finding that the more I trained seriously, I needed something away from the bike that was going to take away from it and use a different side of my brain. And that was the kind of creative side of thing. I find the bike riding side pretty creative still. It's expressive, it's showing myself in the best way possible, but it's very self-centered, really. It's literally just kind of focused, kind of selfish sport. That's what it is. Whereas the filmmaking, I found I could bring other people into what I was doing. You're a part of something bigger. If I make a video and it gets viewed by 10,000 people or 5,000 people, then each one of those people has a real relevant opinion on maybe how good the video was. Whereas on my cycling, if someone has an opinion on how I ride a bike, I don't really care. Like, I couldn't care less what people thought of my bike riding. But I actually do care what people think about my work in video or in photo.
Cameron Mason is a professional cyclist, British national cyclocross champion, and was a notable YouTuber long before his riding and videos caught the eye of Tom Pidcock, who invited Cameron to join his Trinity Racing squad. Cameron has a distinctive style on the bike and as a content producer, and among his many achievements, he is known as the inventor of the porridge core vlog genre, also known as oat gazing. It's become common for pro athletes to get started as creators long after finding success in their sport. What's different about Cameron is that he is a digital native who had an interest in photography and video that he cultivated from a very early age. As you'll hear in this interview, Cameron is incredibly humble, and he is so good that he is one of the few pro cyclists not from mainland Europe to have broken through to score top 5 finishes in Belgian cyclocross races and a 9th place finish at the World Championships relatively early in his pro career. Cameron is a gifted storyteller, and it has been truly remarkable to watch what he has accomplished and the grace and humility with which he has overcome setbacks like a broken arm that took him off the bike for half a year just as he started to really hit his stride. It seems inevitable that Cameron is heading to the World Tour, the very highest level of pro road cycling, and whatever happens next, I'm excited to share this, the most in-depth conversation Cameron has ever done about his life and work. This is once again a double episode with the talented Spencer Martin from Beyond the Peloton, the pro cycling podcast that we co-host that covers pro racing in depth. This part of the interview takes a deep look at Cameron's life and work as a creator and human being, kind of the VH1 behind the music look at Cameron's life and times. And in part 2 on Beyond the Peloton, we go deep on pro bike racing and Cameron's achievements in that domain. You can find Beyond the Peloton everywhere you listen, and you can find a link to that episode at choosethehardway.com. Choose the Hard Way is a podcast where guests share stories about how hard things build stronger humans. Stronger humans who have more fun because of the hard things they do. If you're new to this show, thank you for listening, and please like, subscribe, hit 5 stars, and leave a review wherever you listen. You can find Cameron on Instagram at cameroony.mason, on Twitter at camrooney, and on YouTube. As always, you can find those links in the show notes.
I'm in Scotland right now, in my hometown of Linlithgow, which is like 20 minutes outside of Edinburgh, so right in that central belt.
Oh, wow.
So I'm very close to everything in Scotland, it feels like. So I'm 1 hour away from the Trossach mountain range. I'm 1 hour away from the Tweed Valley, which is where all the mountain biking in Scotland is. And then on my road bike, I can pretty much get everywhere else, all the main kind of climbs and roads in central Scotland.
That's phenomenal. Do you ever ride over to Arthur's Seat, lock up your bike, and do a run?
No, but I actually rode around Arthur's Seat for the first time in my life on Saturday. So I'd never, I've lived near Edinburgh for all my life, and I'd ridden past it, but there's a loop that goes around it. It's a closed road loop, and I rode around it for the first time on Saturday.
Phenomenal.
Pretty monumentous. So no, just you learn new things every week.
How long is that ride?
Well, the actual loop is like 5-10 minutes with like a really short punchy climb. but I was doing this Saturday 9:30 bunch, so it's like just a very kind of informal, kind of formal, but very fast bunch ride. 70k is like pretty much flat out. So if I ride through to there, though, it makes a 6 hour day, a 5-6 hour day for me. So it's a really good training day. I've been kind of bulking them out through the winter. It's a good thing to look forward to in the week because you're riding to there for 40k or something. You're going to get the speed with the group ride, and then you have to kind of crawl home. And once you're home, then you've done a good day of riding.
And do you have a nickname on the group ride? Like, do they call you the Smashing Machine, or what do you got?
I don't think it's maybe enough. Not much needs to be said. There's almost like it doesn't need to be said. If they see me rolling around the corner, then we know what we're on for. And there's a few guys. That
I love it.
Like, as long as a few guys of us turn up, then everyone knows what they're in for. That we're going to ride the climbs basically as hard as we can, and try and drop as many people as possible. But there's always a regrouping, and there's guys from the Edinburgh Uni that come out who have never done a bunch ride before, and they're happy to just sit on the back. It is pretty inclusive, and I was that kid getting dropped on that bunch ride 5-10 years ago. My kind of coach and mentor brought me there for the first time, maybe like 2017, 2018. And I got dropped because I just could not deal with the pace. And then now, 5-6 years later, I'm a guy who can drop people. So it's things like that you can see progress in.
So Cameron, what came first for you? Being an artist and making videos and having an interest in music, or being a bike racer?
Bike racer. I think, everyone, like as a kid, you always need something that's going to be that number one thing, and you're going to put all that energy into. Because I just remember having so much energy and always not getting bored, but there was just never enough to do, and the bike was that. And then the kind of creative side came a bit later as the kind of side hustle to the bike riding, because I was finding that the more I trained seriously, I needed something away from the bike that was going to kind of take away from it, and use maybe a different side of my brain. And that was the kind of creative side of things. So the video making, the music, the photos, video editing, like that was that side of the brain. Like I find the bike riding side pretty creative still, it's expressive. I'm like, showing myself in the best way possible, but it's just self-centered really. It's literally just kind of focused, kind of selfish sport. That's what it is. Whereas the filmmaking I found was a lot more like, I could really bring other people into what I was doing. And it was way more kind of, you're a part of something bigger. If I make a video and it gets viewed by 10,000 people or 5,000 people, then each one of those people has a real like relevant opinion on maybe how good the video was. Whereas on my cycling, if someone has an opinion on how I ride a bike, I don't really care. Like I couldn't care less what people thought of my bike riding, but I actually do care what people think about my work in video or in photo and stuff like that. So I find that really, really cool, so like YouTube comments, Instagram comments, that type of stuff, like whether it's good, whether it's criticism or if it's just praise, I find that really interesting because everyone has such a different eye and such a different view on how things should be. And, the way that I've maybe presented an experience or a race, that's just one way of telling that story. And it's nice to see how other people maybe would have done it differently, or if they just like how I've kind of portrayed it.
That's really wild, Cameron. Like I was telling you earlier, I think before we started recording, I've been a big fan of your video work since you started making it, I think. And today I was going back through your YouTube feed and I was trying to figure out what the first video of yours I may have watched might have been. I don't know if do you still have your first videos up, or have you edited the list down?
I think everything's still there, but the funny thing is that YouTube isn't the first place that I started putting videos. It was Facebook. Okay. So like on my personal Facebook profile, I would post all my very, very early stuff. So this is when I was maybe 13, 14 years old. So like editing on Windows Movie Maker, then not really knowing what aspect ratio to export anything in. So by the time it got onto Facebook, it would have massive black bars around it, or it would like the audio would just come out of one ear and things like that. So, I learned a lot through those videos, but they're not actually very public anymore. But I'd like to dig all of them out, and they're on hard drives places, and they are on the internet somewhere. But once it got to YouTube, it was a lot more refined. By the time it got to YouTube, by the time videos got to YouTube, that wasn't like finished product. Boom, there you go. That's what I was doing. There was quite a lot that went through that, and it started with just getting a video camera, when like an action, like kind of sport camera. It was like a GoPro, but it was like vertical. It was like so awkward to mount. It was like this tall, and like it was like a phone size thing. So I'd like mount it on helmets, and me and my dad's a plumber, and we'd get the like 1/4 inch or whatever, the right thread type, and we'd make like just mounts for it. Because I hadn't quite got onto the dream was always, I want a GoPro, like the GoPro dream. But that was a little bit out of my pocket money budget. So I was just dealing with this tiny little action thing. We'd make mounts, and I'd ride bikes and jump over them. And it must have done 50 frames a second, because I could do a little bit of slow-mo. And like, that was the best thing ever, being able to do half speed slow-mo. Because anything I did film, I was like, I want more. I want to see it for longer, especially because it was self-filmed a lot. So I would just have the camera on the ground, and I just ride past it for like a second, and then have to go all the way back up. But then that evolves into all the things you learn with these little cameras. Evolves into in all the things you learn for our future things.
It's funny because what you're describing is essentially like in the surfing world, it feels like every surfer, especially young surfers, are also filmmakers. It's like you just kind of have to be both. It's almost exactly what you're describing, like, getting into filmmaking, just capturing your own stuff. Like, do you think that this will be like the norm for cyclists, or like especially mountain bikers going forward, or are you just kind of an outlier in this world?
I think it helps. Like, why wouldn't you want a way of showing yourself off? And like in a sport, like you say with mountain biking, or maybe even surfing, where it's not normal, it's just on TV and like so like accessible. Like mountain bike and cyclocross to an extent is actually just a digital media like sport, because like when I started racing cyclocross, there was no live coverage anywhere. You would maybe find a dodgy stream of a Belgian race somewhere, or you'd find the replay would go up on YouTube like a day later or something. But there was no actual way of like, I aspire to be a cyclocross racer, so how would people actually see any of you doing that stuff? So it just happened that I was making videos as well. So with the cyclocross side of thing, like that was really big, was that I was doing that high level racing, and I wasn't on TV. I wasn't really in the coverage, but I was making my own media. So that gave a whole platform for people to follow along. And it just happened that my journey was interesting to people, because I was English speaking, I was pretty young. I think people could tell that I was good, but I wasn't like winning everything easily. So that's interesting as well. So that kind of storyline helped with the cyclocross side of things. But like the off-road stuff, just being a mountain biker, it's a YouTube sport. Like watching all of the Atherton Project videos, watching all of the Red Bull content when I was like 12, 13, 14 years old, like if I wanted to be a mountain biker, of course I wanted to be a filmmaker as well, because that's where I was seeing it all. If you're a road cyclist watching the Tour de France on TV, you're not thinking, oh, I want to be the guy on the motorbike. You're just thinking about the guy who's winning the bike race. But with mountain bike being way more behind the scenes, I think, and like they would show behind the racing, and I wanted to show that side of it, what I was doing. So I think like I'm a massive video person just in general. Even if I wasn't making videos, like I'm just, that's like my media of choice. Like I don't really read. I listen to podcasts sometimes, especially your podcast, obviously, and it's. Yeah, but the video side of things, that I find I can learn so much from video. Like I remember my dad got a load of mountain bike videos burnt onto CDs from one of my friends. So like Earthed, Rome, like all these like really classic mountain bike films, and I would just watch them on repeat. And there were a few skills videos there from like mountain bike magazines, and I could learn a skill on the DVD, and like I watch it on the DVD, like how to pre-jump like a roll-in, and then I would go out and I would be able to pre-jump roll-ins. Like I'm very visual from that point of view. So the video side is super important.
So Cameron, when you got started, and it sounds like this is really interesting to me, but because before your work got to the point where everyone could see it on YouTube, it sounds like you actually had put in years of grinding, figuring out how to use the technology. And I think when I started seeing your work, perhaps that's why it jumped out to me, because you weren't just another mountain bike vlogger. There was a real aesthetic to the work that you were making in terms of the music selection, the slices of life that you were showing, as well as the race preparation, the race footage. And I want to get into some of those specifics because I found your videos to be really beautiful, and they had kind of like this haunting atmospheric quality. And as I was reflecting on how I would characterize your aesthetic for my listeners, I would say you're perhaps the pioneer of what I would call porridge core or oat gaze. You're an oat gazer. So it's like somewhere between My Bloody Valentine and porridge preparation, because there is a lot of porridge preparation in your videos.
Yeah.
But early on when you got to YouTube, how did you think about your aesthetic, the way you were mediating yourself? And as Spencer mentioned, as is the case in a lot of action sports, I think about skateboarding because that's a community I came up in. Yeah. But kind of this, there's just an aesthetic quality and artfulness to what you do. And then there's who you are as an athlete. And then you putting all this together. So how did you think about what you were doing?
Yeah, I think I wasn't thinking about it much. Like, obviously there's just these outside factors and influencers. So, you know, like Casey Neistat would be one of them, you know, like whatever, when I started watching his videos, he was probably still making those one-off YouTube videos, not fully in the daily vlogs. So like would be one influence. Definitely like early mountain bike films, like a lot of Clay Porter's work. So he works a lot with Red Bull and the Athertons. And yeah, I think I enjoyed getting the nice shots. So like I definitely had an eye for like wanting things to look quite nice and aesthetic. And it just happened that things I was shooting were just like training stuff and race day stuff and you know, just not that interesting things. But if I shot it in a little bit more of an interesting way, then that kind of made the overall video a bit more appealing. And then like music choice, like I've always had a little bit more of an alternative like music like interest. Like my dad's has pretty wide range of music interests, and he's had a big influence on me. So I would always like look out. First of all, I went through like Spotify and finding like real songs, but then I was like dealing with copyright stuff. So then I went to like loads of different websites, and I was using one website for a while, which was, I think it was like freemusic.org, which was like a little bit in the middle of like, it was kind of more Creative Commons. Like you could use it, but you couldn't really make the money from it, and which I didn't care about at all. I just wanted to use good music, but it was a really good way of finding like properly out there music, like really alternative, really like experimental music, and then working out how like I wanted that to work with cycling, because it depends what side of, you know, cycling media you're on. Like it can be really, really kind of alternative and expressive, but it can also just be really general and boring kind of electronic pop. So I kind of was somewhere in the middle of like, right, I want like 12-year-old, 13-year-old kids to be able to watch it and be interested and like keep their attention going. But then I also want people who maybe have a bit more of a finer eye, or want to get a bit more quality out of it. Not just, you know, he's going to a bike race and he might win or he might do well. I want people to enjoy it for the video it is, because then it means that I can, even if I wasn't doing well on a bike, people could still watch videos for the sake of it being a nice video. And then if I was doing both, if I was doing something really cool and making a cool video, then that would just be the kind of perfect combination. And just over the last few years, as I've got more successful, I've tried to hang on to the kind of quality of like, I don't want to just get the content out there for the sake of showing people how good I am, or, you know, I won this bike race. I also want it to have my style and my own kind of characteristics that people watched my videos, why they watched those videos like 5-6 years ago. So it's that kind of, and I do really enjoy that kind of that balance, trying to make something that's mine and like original, but then also getting across, I was at this race, and these were the hard bits, these were the good bits, and just trying to piece all that together.
Is there like, what's the local like filmmaking and artistic community like where you live in Scotland? Like you're close to Edinburgh, which, I kind of think is maybe like the cultural hub of the country, if that's a correct.
Yeah. Glasgow and Edinburgh are like the main. Yeah, like Glasgow is probably more artistic than Edinburgh, but from a culture point of view, yeah, Edinburgh is pretty hard.
So are you like connected? You were mentioning you're on the group rides. I assume you're connected into the local cycling community. Are you kind of connected in the same way to the artistic community, or do you see yourself as an outsider there?
Yeah, not so much. Like through school, I started to kind of go in a little bit of an artistic direction, and I took art to the highest level possible at high school. I did film and media studies. I did graphic design. And I started to apply to kind of film college. It would be like a university course into film and media. Just at the same time, I also was kind of progressing my bike riding, so I ended up not going to university. But yeah, it's kind of, I think my level of filmmaking is just nowhere near the level it would be needed to be kind of really appreciated at a higher level, and it just happens that cycling's not a mainstream of enough sport for those things to go together to like get me a little bit higher up in the kind of artistic world. But maybe I think it would take more effort and involvement from me on my filmmaking side. Like the bike riding side is definitely high enough, but I'd have to kind of double down on some proper filmmaking and to like do a really good job, really write something original and really kind of get that side of things, because up until now it is really just casual. It is on the side. It's more like passion stuff. But I can see that with just a little bit more effort, more hours, more kind of commitment into that side of things, that I could do something pretty cool that could maybe get recognized internationally or nationally, that type of thing.
It's funny that you say that, Cameron, because I think that you definitely make professional quality work that's excellent, that has a unique aesthetic. And I think you're also actually exhibiting the characteristics that of all of the guests that I've had on the show who are world-class at what they do, which is you always wanted to be better, and you're pushing yourself no matter what level you're at to go to another level with what you're doing. And something that you've mentioned a couple of times I'd love to explore. First of all, it sounds like you have a very supportive family, and like you have a cool dad who's spent a lot of time with you and been involved in your life and the projects that you do. Spencer and I are both dads. I don't know if we're aspiring to be cool dads, but we're definitely aspiring to be the best dads that we can be, if I might speak for you, Spencer.
Oh yeah, definitely. As you were saying that about Cameron's dad, I was thinking, man, I hope that's me. So yeah, I want to be a cool dad.
Yeah, but Cameron, can you talk more about how was your dad involved it sounds like from the beginning? Like, how did he support and encourage you? Did you just naturally gravitate? You kind of mentioned how you got into the artistic side of things, and it sounds like you've had support there. But when you were a young person, how did you find cycling? What did you explore, and what encouragement or direction did your parents give you?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds a bit cliche, but my dad was definitely more the sporting side and my mum was more the creative side. But I think the way that they like nurtured me in both sides is what it was really good. It was never one over the other. It was never kind of, if you're going to do this, son, you need to think about getting rid of that. There was always a space for it to work together. So yeah, my mum is way more artistic, like a lot more expressive. And my dad is, very practical and a lot sportier. So the cycling side of things came from my dad, but he's also like really just like compassionate to the whole like picture of who a person should be. Like he's seen it through his work in trade and in sport that, to be a rounded person, you need that other thing. You need that kind of complementary thing that's going to prop you up. And for me, it's a little bit of that creative side. So the cycling started, it was actually my mum's side of the family. My cousin, he always rode bikes and he was getting really into bike racing. And he's 6-7 years older than me. So we went to one of his bike races when I was 8-9 years old. He was already racing with the under 14s and under 16s, but I just went in the under 8s race. And I did really well and really enjoyed it because I'd always ridden my bikes just for fun in the garden and doing jumps and things. But then that kind of introduced me to the racing side of things. And I was always competitive, but just as competitive as any other kid would be. You know, like I wanted to win, just, you know, not for any big reason, but just because it felt nice. But then through kind of under 12 mountain bike racing, I actually got pretty good because I had really good skills because I'd just come home from school and ride bikes until it got dark. You know, we had these like play around bikes. We used to go to the local like dump or the local like rubbish place, and people would throw away bikes and we'd take them home, like fix them up a bit. Normally like they'd have like a buckled wheel or the brake would be disconnected or something silly. And then I would ride them on jumps and like bury them into the ground, spray paint them, everything. So like we used to have these muckabout bikes, we call them. So I learned loads of skills on them. And then, as I got into the racing more, I realized that those skills had done me really well. But then into under 14 and under 16 racing, like my physical development, like slowed down a lot compared to my peers. So like I was racing guys who were, you know, fully fledged teenagers and getting into adulthood. And I was still little and skinny and weak, and I just got left behind a bit. So at that point, that would have been the point where I would have probably stopped bike racing if it was all just about the winning, because I just wasn't winning at all. I wasn't even getting close to the podiums in cyclocross and also in mountain bike and road at the time. But then I caught up with my peers, you know, as we got into junior, and I got like that puberty kind of spurt, and I went up and kind of started to fill out a bit. Then I caught them up and then started beating them again, because all the things that I'd learned in under 14 and under 16 when I was just not winning bike races actually stood me really well. Like I wasn't winning on pure power, on pure pace. I was winning because I was, you know, tactically better, technically better. And also I wanted it more because I'd not won any bike races for a good like 3-4 years. So that kind of balance got me to a place in junior and into U23 where things get pretty level, you know, like everyone's had quite a lot of years to develop. Everyone's physically, they're all quite there. Then though, at U23 level, it's just about how well you're doing things and how much you want it. So it becomes a lot more of a level playing ground, and you just have to show yourself for who you are. And I then also took another step up then in the last few years.
My brain is still spinning, and I'm wondering if I'm talking to an alien that lives in a parallel universe. You have organized mountain bike racing for kids under 8 years old. Is that right?
Yeah. So you would turn up to a Scottish cross-country race, and you have the small course, which is for under 12s, and they have separate starts from under 8s. So under 8s, under 10s, and under 12s. And they can be some of the biggest races there are. You know, it's kids of dads who are racing and kids of mums who are racing. It's younger siblings of teenagers who are racing, but it's also people like me and my brother. My brother's 3 years older than me. That was how we got into the racing, is because we had a relative who was already there. We went along. You know, you don't need a very good bike to race. You don't need any special equipment. You just turn up. The race is 10 minutes long. Everybody gets a medal. There's not really a podium for the little kids. And then, you know, you go and do it again next week. And the amount of kids that come through that is super important to Scottish sport and to British sport as well, because that's all at the same race on the same day. You know, I'd do my race at whatever it would be, 10, 11 o'clock. And then I'd go get something bite to eat, and I'd go and watch the elites race. And at the time, those elites were also Commonwealth Games athletes, Olympic athletes. And that's the best way, I think, to inspire guys is to have everything in one place. It's really hard to do that, but to really like have a real direct link between kids who just like riding bikes and people who are doing it for their job. And they can see that in real life, you know, if I keep doing this, or if I really enjoy this, then I can get to there, that type of thing.
You're kind of single-handedly destroying like the U.S. sport right now by describing this. This is not how things are done.
Yeah, I've heard U.S. cycling. They have some harder workarounds for that. I don't know what you guys' opinions on that.
And even, you know, it's like, you know, having kids myself, my son's 3, and it's like well, should we get him on a travel soccer team? Has he plateaued? I don't know. Maybe we just pull him out. I don't think he can make it in the pros. Like everything's projected forward from such a young age that it does feel unhelpful.
Yeah.
And what you're describing, where you were just racing a lot, you were behind in puberty, but then you caught up and started beating people. That's like a really common theme amongst pro athletes, that they weren't always the ones just dominating.
Yeah, and I think cycling's a good sport probably compared to other things, that like I wasn't written off as someone who could just never make it. It wasn't like a real do or die time. I think maybe in gymnastics or in track and field, if you weren't in that like, because in other sports there's loads of resources maybe at that junior level or at that youth level, and if you miss out on those resources, then that's really going to stop you later on. Whereas I think it would be in a sport like cycling, where we see about how it's, there's a lot to be said for athletes who are maybe who are 25 up to 30. They've still got a lot to give. If you were to just put resources at 16-year-olds, then you're going to miss out on this whole band of athletes who you haven't even got close to being at their full potential by 16 or 18. So I was lucky to benefit from that. I still had people around me who believed in me, whether that's it, like the institutions like British Cycling and Scottish Cycling, that I wasn't like totally put to the side. People could still see that I was committed, motivated, and like talented. They could see all of that, even though I physically wasn't as good as anyone else. And that little bit of patience then meant that it came around for them as well. So they got to get the benefit of me being a good bike rider just a little bit later after my peers.
And Cameron, no disrespect to any of your competitors, because in, I think, the 5+ years I've been watching your videos, I've seen you go from someone who it looked like you were having some success at the regional level. You were going over to Belgium to compete in races at the highest level.
Yeah.
And then you had this progression that I think most athletes dream about having. And you put in the hard work to make it happen. And you got to this level now where, as we're going to talk about on the second part of this interview on Beyond the Peloton, people who follow the sport closely, like Spencer and I, are wondering, when is Cameron going to the World Tour? And, are you going to follow your former Trinity Racing teammate, Tom Pidcock? And are we going to see you at the Tour de France? We'll talk about that on the second part of this over on Beyond the Peloton. I'm wondering, when at the point at which you started making the YouTube videos, it looked like you were a fairly standout, or you were on the rise as a rider in Scotland, in the UK. I couldn't name one other Scottish cyclocross racer. I mean, I'm sure they're very talented, but you've put in the hard yards to, as a creator, to position yourself to create a differentiated brand and product. How did your peers react when you started making the videos, and what's happened over time?
I think I'd always been making the videos, so there was never Cameron's trying something new, what's he doing? There was never any of that. It was just that's just what Cameron does alongside of his bike racing, I actually was really good at taking photos for everyone as well. I would do my race in the under 14s or 16, and then I would take photos of all the other races and all the other categories. So I had a Facebook page called Cameron Mason Photography, and I would post just albums of 500-600 photos for everyone to use and everyone to post on their Instagrams and stuff. So I was well known as someone who could use a camera, but also was relatively good on a bike. And then it just happened that as I got better on a bike and I kept making the videos, is that people could then start to follow me as a person, within a small community like Scottish cycling, Scottish cyclocross, and Scottish mountain bike. You follow the racing by just being at the racing. But as I started to go outside of that community, people, the first people in my audience were literally just my peers and fellow racers, because they wanted to see, I went to a national cyclocross race in Bradford in England. They wanted to see how I got on. So of course they'd be following from that point of view. And then once I start to get known in that type of community, at a UK level, then when I went to Belgium for the first time, people then wanted to see how I got on and all of that. I don't know, it was just a little bit of a snowball thing. You have to, it's all just different base levels of following and of audience. I've got a little bit of a following in the US, I think, from a cyclocross point of view, because an English speaking person in Belgian cyclocross is is like people want to see that. And then I've got a big UK following, and then I've also got a Belgian following, more from a younger audience, because in cyclocross it's incredibly traditional media. Like it's in Belgium, it's like football. It's, you know, it's basically just in the newspapers and on the main channel TV traditionally. So someone who was making YouTube content, like I was the first person really ever to make cyclocross YouTube content, and a lot of younger Belgians and Dutch cyclocross fans started to follow along with that, and then that built out that kind of side of my audience. And then naturally, when I started getting better, the traditional media wanted to know who I was as well. So then I had, you know, people wanting interviews and people chatting to me at the races, but I already had this, you know, following of whatever, 10, 15,000 people on a kind of online thing. So I found that quite funny that I already kind of had a following and an audience by the time I was starting to get success, like traditional success. But I'd made that myself. You know, I'd worked hard to create not character, to show off my character in the best way possible, show off what I was doing. And it just happened that then came actual sport success as well.
As you thought about the structure of your videos over time, you had, you know, I feel like you have a couple of periods of your work. There's the early stuff where there's somewhat instructional things, or like you out on the trail talking about how to do something. Then there's the middle period. I would like Cameron Mason's middle period, where you had it was you and your dad. You're going to the races in Belgium, which I found to be really intriguing. I actually wanted to talk about this. And for anybody listening who's not deeply familiar with cyclocross, as the three of us are, and of course Spencer is located in the actual, some people think that Belgium is the global epicenter of cyclocross. It's actually Boulder, Colorado, and specifically the Valmont Bike Park, and Spencer is not far from there. But you know, you and your dad, you're packing up a van every weekend. You've got multiple bikes, multiple sets of wheels, all this kit, probably a power washer. You're driving across the English Channel, right? Like you're probably going through the Channel or whatever. And then you're going to a location in Belgium at a race. You're setting up, you're racing, you're going home. On top of that, you're doing a pretty complex video shoot. So did that add complexity for you? Or at that point, was it just a natural thing? Because it's a lot of pressure for an athlete to step into that environment at the highest level without all of the hullabaloo of, on top of that, doing a video production.
Yeah, I mean, I get asked a lot about like, oh, how much extra effort is it to create the videos and all of that. And I think, yeah, for someone who's never made a video before and who is just doing all these experiences for the first time, if you were to just pick up and plonk on them like all of this extra video pressure, they'd be out of practice. They wouldn't know their timings. There'd be so many aspects that they just didn't know. Because I'd become just as well oiled in my filmmaking as I had in my cycling, it felt like just routine, you know, like, am I doing something significant, like signing on or pinning on my numbers? Well, then I should just film this, and it takes 10 seconds and then I move on with my day. It, like, in my head, it's actually like such small pieces of my day that are needed to create a really good video, actually. And it was just learning out what works, you know, like the spacing out of like, right, I need to get this part of my day so that it links up with, you know, I'm about to head out on course. So we need to know what tire pressure I'm riding. And then if we need to know that, then the bikes already need to be out of the van. And just, you know, you've got a flow and a kind of process on race day with your own bikes and with your own setup, but then just having, you know, you've just got an audience alongside you. You've just got to have a bit of your brain thinking about that. But it doesn't really take much, you know, like, you know, in that middle period when it was just me and my dad, you know, he would have a GoPro in the pits on his chest. So that was pretty easy. You know, I just give him that. It would pretty much record the whole race. It creates a lot of work after, because then I've got like an hour of footage that I need to like find just the 10-second clip of me doing a bike change. But I'd get better at it and work out what are the significant things. But as you say, I was working out what was even going on anyway. Like, I'd never been to this random field in Belgium before. I'd never done this race. I'd never raced these people. So videoing alongside of that was a little bit extra, but totally worth it when I can look back and see, like, you know, that was the very first time I raced this person. And now 6 years later, I'm still racing and we're both pro and that type of thing. So there is so much value in having all of this like archive and just all these experiences on hard black and white paper, basically, like that. It's all there for people to see, and but most importantly there for me to see. You know, I go back and I watch my own videos, every couple of months, because I just find them so, like, when I create the video and I edit the video, I get a bit sick of it. Obviously, everyone does. Like, you put a lot of work and effort into it, but once it's done and once you've lived that experience, then to go back and relive it I really, really enjoy that. I find it so rewarding. So yeah, it's good fun to look back at old videos as well.
And when you were going to these races in Belgium, like, what's your mindset? Are you like, I mean, as Andrew said, Boulder might be the epicenter of cyclocross in the world, but Belgium's a close second. Like, it's big there. I'd imagine it's a major step up from Scotland. Were you intimidated, or do you just kind of have like a inner self-confidence? It's like, I'm just going to go out and do my thing.
It was just the natural progression. Like, I'd raced at Scottish level. I'd then raced at a national UK level. I'd started to win races as a junior at national level. And riders before me had shown that the next step was to go to Belgium. So riders like Tom Pidcock, Evie Richards, Anna Kay, Ben Turner, you know, Ian Field, like proper strong cyclocross racers, they all then tried to show themselves in Belgium and the Netherlands. So it was just natural that we would be the next people to try that. And yeah, there are like barriers to get over. You know, living in central Scotland, it takes 8 hours just to get to the Channel Tunnel. And then, you know, you're getting across the Channel Tunnel, you're then another 3 hours to wherever you're going in Belgium. Like, just to do one race, that's 12 hours of travel minimum, with a Channel Tunnel crossing. And then the whole unknowns of going to a race. Like, fun thing is, like, we go to races now and it's the 4th, 5th time that I've been to them in my career, and it just feels like normal, but it was so abnormal going there. The first trip we went to was the first Belgian race I did was actually Zonhoven, which I could have picked 10 easier races to do. Zonhoven is like one of the sandiest, one of the most aggressive cyclocross courses out there. Loads of running. Just the most extreme version of a cyclocross course in Belgium, really. And we picked that one for some reason, just because, you know, right, we might as well do it properly. And we brought a power washer for no reason, because we didn't realize that the race provided the power washers. I had no idea what sand tires were, so I did the whole race on mud tires, which, if you know about riding in sand, it's like a massive, it makes things a lot harder, because you basically just dig yourself into a hole. But my attitude, you know, this was when I was in 2017 or 2018, but I had a pretty good mindset going into it. I wasn't there for a result. I was just there to soak up the experience. I had a bit of a messy race, but as soon as I finished, I was like, I need to do that again. Like, I need to do all the things I did better, and then we can see. And I feel like I've just done that for the last 4 years. Like, if something's not been right, I just would want to go back, do it better, because then I would know if it was good, or if I was good at it. Because I just couldn't say whether it was going to work unless I'd had a better race, you know. Like, I just wanted every race to just be that little bit better. And I feel like I've done that for the last kind of 3-4 seasons.
And Cameron, throughout this process, either with what you've done as an artist in the video making or as a professional athlete, when have things not gone the way that you had hoped they had gone? Have you hit any major setbacks on this journey?
Yeah, I mean, I was like a sponge, like just trying to get everything. And like we were doing international mountain bike racing in the summer, and then we were going to Belgium in the winter. And like the progression was so steep, because every experience I did was brand new. And there was so much to learn from it. And then things kind of plateaued when I was kind of second or third year U23. So that's kind of 2020, partly because of COVID. The COVID summer that I missed out on a load of racing and a load of development. And then I had a series of injuries that just kind of stunted me quite a bit. I broke my collarbone in November 2020. Then 4 or 5 months later, I broke my humerus in my elbow quite badly and needed surgery all on my elbow. And it meant I couldn't ride a bike for 6 months because of the rehab involved. I lost a load of muscle mass in my arm and my shoulder. So I had to kind of build all that back. And yeah, that was probably the toughest time in my kind of cycling career, just from it was just such a long period of time relatively, and it felt like that in my head, that I just couldn't do what I enjoyed. So I just found that really hard to, 6 months of anything, whether it's a good thing or a bad thing, it's quite a lot to deal with. And that was just, too long for me to be away from something that gave me so much kind of purpose and so much joy. I learned a lot from that.
How did you deal with that time off the bike? And how did you have that injury? How'd you break your elbow?
Yeah, I was actually at the very first mountain bike race with my team in 2021 in Haming in Austria. And we'd done the race had gone well. And then 2 days after, we were just training on the circuit, on the mountain bike circuit. We were testing tires and tire pressure. And I was just coming down this one kind of rocky descent, and I clipped a tree with my left handlebar, pretty high speed, and kind of fell backwards and basically elbowed the edge of a rock. So it wasn't like I landed on anything with my weight, or I didn't put my hands out or anything. I just fell on a really sharp rock that just broke straight through the bone. I thought I dislocated it at first because I was like, I can't really move my arm. But it was quite clear once I got to the hospital that I'd broken it quite badly and damaged the actual elbow joint as well. So they ended up putting in 2 plates, a load of screws and some wiring on my elbow joint to kind of keep it all together. So then the initial thing was obviously just, be happy you can use your elbows, just start with the physio, which is just trying to get movement back. But then I did start to realize that this was going to be a more serious thing, because there was just, lots and lots of steps to get back. And I had to go into quite a hole of, like, with any injury, with any illness, my mindset is just like buckle up, act like it's not happened, and just pretend like in 2 days you'll be back on the bike. And I basically did that with my injury, this one. I just went for weeks where I was like, just do what you need to do, and in a couple of weeks you'll be back on it. But the prospect of not being able to actually do that, people were saying to me, it's going to be a couple of months of work to get back close to riding a bike. That really made me realize, like, this needs a little bit more thought about how I'm actually going to go about this, because if I just keep pretending like I am an athlete and like I am just going to get back on my bike in a couple of days or a couple of weeks, I'm never going to let myself, my body and my mind accept the situation. So the first thing was acceptance. I needed to accept the reality that I wasn't going to be able to do the thing I really like to do for a while. Then it was to just make a plan, like work out the reality of the situation, and then kind of disconnect from that. So the issue was that in my head, I was still a bike rider, but not riding a bike. So the first thing I tried to do was try and remove that part of my brain. So I went and did other things. I went and started doing hill running once I could be more mobile, and found, like, the most important thing was to find other things that were just a little bit fun, and that, they didn't have to be cycling, or they didn't have to be anywhere near as fun or enjoyable as cycling, but anything was better than sitting at home feeling sad about not riding a bike. So just working out what all those was. But me and my dad, I would sit like in our living room every day and go, I can't do this, I can't do this, and I can't do this. And we'd just sit there for an hour thinking about what I would want to do, because I was pretty depressed and pretty sad. And when you're in that hole, it's quite hard to even find the joy in all of the little things, like I could have gone for walks and I could have gone and seen friends and stuff, but those just felt nowhere near enough to, like, give me all those feelings that I was missing from riding bikes. So I had to let myself come all the way down into this hole of kind of acceptance, and then just slowly rebuild. And that rebuild process was where I learned about how much I can get from all these other things, how much I can get from being physically tired. Like I'd realized that one part of bike riding that made me so happy was that I could physically exhaust myself to the point of, like, oh my God, how am I ever going to ride a bike tomorrow? And then I could recover and come back from that. And I wasn't able to do that when I had a broken arm. And I was like, that's something to be grateful for, like gratitude. Like I had a list on my phone that I would almost every day I would end up adding more things to it, because it was work that I did with a psychologist and with a behavioral lifestyle advisor. one part of that was the kind of gratitude side of things, and we're learning like what I should be grateful for, my family, all those kind of more simple, basic things. But then I would actually get deep down into it and realize, I was grateful for the amount of food that I could eat after doing a big training session. And I was grateful for the Strava kudos that I got when I did a big bike ride. I was missing all this stuff. And as all these things came back, I just felt 2 times, 3 times more grateful for it after my injury as I did before.
And Cameron, during that period of time or later, did you think bigger picture about when your bike racing career is over? What are your aspirations as a filmmaker, as an artist? Is that something that you've thought about?
Yeah, I mean, during the injury, I didn't think about, there was no part of my brain that was like, oh, I'm not going to ride a bike again. I was just worried that it wouldn't feel the same as when I'd left it. But then what I actually came to realize was that nothing ever feels the same. The worst thing you could do would be to mourn for how things felt in the past, because how they're going to feel in the future is never the same as how they'll feel in the past. So that's kind of what I learned. And when the feeling did come back, it was different, but that was actually not a bad thing at all. But yeah, to answer your question, really, during the kind of injury side of things, there was not a part of my brain that thought, oh, I'm going to do something else. But if I can think about it now, I would like to do something creative. I'd like to shed light on maybe something that people wouldn't have seen before. That's what I did enjoy that about making my videos at first with cyclocross, was that I could, get out. People hadn't seen a Scottish bike racer race in Belgium before, and I was the first person to do that. So I would be quite interested to do something like that for the first time, whether it's showing how people live in a certain place of the world, or documenting something. I think I would find a lot out of that.
One more question, then we'll wrap this up and we'll hop over and record the episode for Beyond the Peloton. At what point did you get on to Trinity Racing? How did that happen? And could you just share a little bit about what you picked up from being around Tom Pidcock, indisputably one of the world's best cyclists? What did it feel like to go from I'm in a van with my dad to I'm in a van with one of the best bike racers in the world, who's a world champion and headed to the world tour?
Yeah, so it was actually, he just Instagram DM'd me on Instagram kind of midsummer 2019. He already knew of me, but we'd never really chatted. We were at the same World Championships together. My first World Championships were in Bogens in Denmark in 2019, where he won, and I got maybe 42nd or something in the U23. And we'd interact a little bit, and he seemed to think I was a pretty nice guy, and he was setting up his cyclocross team, and he needed another guy and a girl, and I was one of the guys he asked. And we just, I told him that I was committed and I wanted to make it work. And as soon as we got out to Belgium, I think he realized that he'd got someone maybe that wasn't going to win the bike races, but someone who was going to be totally committed to the cause, really dedicated and also fun to be around. So yeah, we lived together for those 2 seasons. So 4 months at a time in a house in Belgium, training every day pretty much together. And yeah, I was looking back so fresh. I was just so inexperienced. I hadn't really trained before anywhere near as much as I was about to train with Tom. And yeah, even just the lifestyle side of things, something I learned from Tom was that he was very good at putting things in boxes. He's really good at polarizing things. So say there was a bad race or a bad experience, he'd be great at dealing with it head on, putting it in a box, and then just putting that box away. That's it, done. On to the next thing. His ability to refocus and to readjust was just crazy. Even after good experiences, he would win a European Championships, be really happy, be really proud of himself, put it in a box, out the way, onto the next thing. And that relentless kind of back-to-back mentality was super impressive. And there were no secrets, living with him, there was nothing oh, he has this for breakfast, which means he's so good. He's doing this type of training session, which means he's so good. Everything he was doing, I was doing, and I was not as good as him, but I was going in that same direction. We were all eating the same, training the same, resting the same, but he was really good at that polarizing. So when he was doing something, he would be doing it as good as possible. He would never try to spin too many plates at once. So yeah, if we were on a training session, the only thing that mattered in that moment was that training session. And then when you're at a race, it's full race head. And it's just that ability to put things in their place and in boxes and not let them interfere with each other. Like, there's no reason why your training session that maybe didn't go so well on Thursday, why that should affect how you race on a Saturday. So that, I think, is something that I've learned from him, and hopefully will kind of get better at and take into the future.
Before Tom slid into your DMs, how did you get on his radar? Was it your results, or was it your video making, or both?
I was present, and I think he probably had watched my YouTube videos. And that he did mention that it was like, right, you're obviously a decent cyclocross rider, but it's great for the team also, because he's starting a team with his manager. He's trying to find sponsors, and a massive part of all of that is the video production. So like, if we can have a rider that also just makes great videos on the side, we don't have to pay him any differently. We just treat him like a bike rider, and he's also just got this passion. It's great for them. So it just happened that helped me. But it depends like what world you're in how much the video makes a difference. Like, in most levels of sport and most levels of cycling, like, it's number one priority is results and performance. And then you get a little bit further down the list and, content creator or something, maybe that's helpful. But it adds to the whole picture. And I think that's what people see, hopefully, when they see me, is that I've got this character that I'm actually getting across in a positive way. And people maybe see that and maybe, I can monetize that. Or maybe people just want to be a part of that and they want to be connected to my image, and I'm actually getting that out there. So that's a lot better than others, I think.
And the remarkable thing is that once you had that opportunity, you did something that very few people who step up to that level do, outside of people from mainland Europe in cyclocross. And you are now at the very, very highest level of the sport. And you've made this incredibly impressive progression to the point where you're a real contender in, the hardest races in the world, the hardest cyclocross races in the world. And we're going to go deeper on that and where you're headed in part 2 of this interview over on Beyond the Peloton. So Cameron, if people want to find you and if they want to check out these videos, if they want to go deep on Porridge Core and learn your porridge secrets, where should they go?
So it's just Cameron Mason, my name on YouTube. You can go as far down as possible, see if you can find all my older videos. And if you leave a comment, I will end up reading it because I read pretty much all my comments, and whether it's good or bad. And then Camerooni Mason on Instagram. That's kind of more day-to-day stuff if you're interested in that stuff. And then Twitter is Camerooni as well, with an _.
Be sure to catch part 2 of this interview with a deep dive on Cameron Mason's pro cycling career over on Beyond the Peloton, the pro cycling podcast I co-host with the talented Spencer Martin. Find Beyond the Peloton everywhere you listen, and you can also find a link to the show at choosethehardway.com. Thank you for listening to Choose the Hard Way. Share this episode with an outstanding human you know. And if you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, hit 5 stars wherever you listen, and leave a positive review. Sign up for the newsletter at choosethehardway.com to get exclusive stories, episode updates, and more. Choose the Hard Way is a Big Truck production. It is produced and edited by Anthony Palmer at Palm Tree Podco. Emily Miles provides digital and marketing support. Jeffrey Nebellini is the designer behind our brand identity and the Choose the Hard Way logo. The content for this show is created by me, Andrew Vance.